Nebraska remains undefeated through non-conference play after they finished up last weekend against Houston Christian in a 59-7 win. They now turn their attention to the conference opener against Michigan this Saturday in Lincoln. Before we get to Michigan, DB, I want to talk about something Coach Rhule shared this week. He shared he thinks his Week 3 team against Houston Christian was much better than his Week 2 team against Akron. Where did you see that play out?
Oh, I like the way he thinks, and I love where his head is. It's one of those things that, I was talking to Tony Beelan earlier on the show, and I said, hey, what's portable from Houston Christian to Michigan, or is it even relevant? And the way he described it, I loved it, right, where he talked about it all matters when you're trying to grow and where you are from an emotional maturity standpoint. And listen, Nebraska's trying to learn how to win, and they're trying to learn how to play well. It's been well documented. You can't in one vein, Ave, say, well, Nebraska hasn't beat a top 25 opponent or a ranked opponent in this long, or Coach Rhule hasn't done this against a ranked opponent in this long, and not talk about the things that come with handling, embracing, and having success in a week like this. So I don't want to be disingenuous about it. I think that it all matters, and I do think, and I said this, so I have to own it. I think I told you, if Nebraska comes out and does what they're supposed to do against Houston Christian, then color me impressed from an emotional maturity standpoint in terms of growth, because it was something as part of a team that I don't think we handled very well, especially early in '94, where we were still kind of growing and understanding what comes with success. And that was coming off an unfortunate loss in '93. So it resonates at a super high level with me because I know it's hard to do. So I do think it ultimately matters, and I agree with Coach Rhule in that respect.
We spoke about this last week in the halftime speech that Coach Rhule had against Akron. That's something you can't do all the time, clearly. How do you see that speech translate? Because we also saw the sights and sounds, and who was it leading that? It was Dane Key. How much of that message didn't just resonate to the second half of Akron, but truly for the tone of the season?
Well, it's what you want as a coach. You want it to be a player-led team. So the seeds were planted and watered by Coach Rhule the week before, and taken over to continue to grow from the players' aspect. So when you see a guy like Dane Key, who has got a ton of experience, he understands practical application, and the transitive property in terms of how it works with this team, I love it, because as a coach, the best teams are player-led. They just are. They're policed by the players. It's understood by the players. And when the players feel like they have some skin in the game and take autonomy of it, that's when real growth starts to happen.
I always like to hear your breakdown of what you're hearing from the players and coaches and media availability this week. What kind of tone are you gathering so far from what we've heard from coordinators and players?
Quietly, I think they're embracing the expectation, where you don't hear kind of the fear or the trepidation or just the uncertainty, which sometimes, when it creeps in, you can't help but to keep it from spilling over. I don't really hear that this week. Now, we'll see how it manifests itself. I mean, Michigan's a good program, a proud program. They've won a ton. They're ranked. Nebraska isn't. They've played the tougher schedule. And so I think Michigan will come in with a tremendous amount of confidence. But I just love the fact that Nebraska sounds like and seems like they're embracing the opportunity.
Two of those players we heard from yesterday, DBs, I know two players you really enjoy, Marquise Buford and Sierra Wright. On the topic of leadership, but also just the message that they were conveying yesterday, from the tone that they were portraying, how do you see that transcend through not only just their position group, but this team, but also how does the way that they attack things in their demeanor translate to their play?
It's the epitome of model behavior. It's a fantastic question, because you would think, and kind of the perception was coming into this season was, well, I can't wait for the young guys, talented DB group, the secondary, this, that, and the other. And we were like waiting for the next people up. Well, not so fast. Like this is still the backbone of this defense from an experience standpoint. And when guys like Sierra Wright, who is off to a fantastic start, not a ton of targets against, they've done a really good job in terms of limiting passing yards. And then Buford, who knows that, listen, you got a couple of young guys nipping at your butt. Guthrie's the true rover, but he comes in for you in dime. Or, Caleb coming off the bench to play right behind Buford early. So it would be easy for Keese to kind of feel that.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't. He continues to lead because ultimately the whole key to football, Ave, and I mean this, if you want to have true success in the ultimate team game, individually you have to think collectively for a common goal. And so when you get veteran leadership, whether it's on the back end, the second level, the D-line, the O-line, when you think collectively for the greater good, you give yourself a chance. It doesn't necessarily yield W's, but you give yourself a chance to have success. So I'd like the senior leadership and the experience standpoint in terms of a game like this.
Yeah, and if there was one message that they were saying, and everyone was saying yesterday, it's clearly very much about Nebraska. But here we know that Michigan is going to pose a lot of challenges Nebraska maybe hasn't seen yet this season. And I want to start with the running game for Michigan because that seems to be the big focus for the defense. What kind of challenges do you see the defensive line having this weekend, and what does Justice Haynes do really well that they maybe haven't seen yet?
So the one thing, the one thing I really love about Haynes, he's got great vision.
Mm-hmm.
He can see creases. He's very good at understanding the blocking schematics up front. And when he sees a crease, man, is he ever in it. He's fast and he's explosive. But sometimes you see guys that will test well, but they don't always play like that. The difference between Haynes and the aforementioned guys that I'm talking about is he knows how to trigger. So he makes you be extremely sound in your run fits and your gap responsibility, because if you fall asleep at the wheel, you're going to find yourself in a little bit of a fender bender, and that fender bender is going to cost you 6 because he's fast enough to go to distance and he will crease you. And the other thing is, and this naturally we don't think these two things go together, Ave, but not only is he able to speed through creases, his patience in terms of pressing the point of attack, where you saw the long run that he bent back against Oklahoma, where it was a nice cutback run. He set it up. He had 2 free Oklahoma defenders, but then he's out the back gate, where he expects to score because of how he set that thing up. I think that's one of the things that it's a huge burden of responsibility for Nebraska to make sure that you are gap sound, because justice will find it.
Interestingly enough, after the Cincinnati game, we talked about how maybe that won't be something this Nebraska team sees a whole lot in a quarterback that can hurt you with his legs, but also not in a design, but more just scrambling, having good vision of the field. And Rhule's like, we might not see that a lot. We might not face an offense that has a lot of tempo like this, and here may be that opportunity this weekend. What will Nebraska show you this weekend if they're able to stop that early, that they've grown from that week one?
It's all about coaching, and it's all about development. You saw Sorsby, and listen, 90% of the scouts that were in Arrowhead, and there were several, were there to see Sorsby. He is a big-time quarterback. He will be drafted. He'll be drafted high, and at some point, Bryce Underwood possesses that kind of potential. So what Bryce showed you last week, even though there were only 2, maybe 3 design runs, his escapability and able to buy time within the pocket, and maybe more so than not, his willingness to actually pull it down and run, I think is different. Because I think in his mind, and I've seen this before from some similar quarterbacks, where there's kind of this thing, there's this stigma that goes with black quarterbacks, Avery, where it's like, I don't want to be known as just a scrambler or just a dual threat guy. I want to make a living being able to throw the football in the pocket. So sometimes there's this internal fight, right, to be different. You want to be more like Warren Moon than you do Michael Vick or Doug Williams than maybe you do, Jaden Daniels. So along those lines, I think the dichotomy and the conundrum that Underwood faces is, I'm a big, strong guy. I've got really good pocket presence. But if I want to give my team the best chance to be successful, especially while I'm allowing my offensive line to grow and mature, I may have to run the football. And while he doesn't appear to enjoy it or want that to be his defining characteristic, his willingness to now do it, which he showed last week against Central Michigan, does add a new dynamic.
Now, is this an area, too, where, yes, he's a very talented quarterback, but he is young, and he hasn't been in a Big Ten game like this yet in this kind of atmosphere?
Yeah.
How does the veteran side of Nebraska's defense maybe take advantage of that?
Well, I think that's twofold. Number one, I think the crowd and the environment comes into play. We saw, and I'm not comparing the two up front necessarily, but I'll talk about the poise at the quarterback spot. Nebraska was able to affect and kind of unfrazzle Shedeur Sanders a year ago. This is a guy that, at the time people were talking about first, second round pedigree. He was a calm, cool customer. And Nebraska rattled him. And get it, I get it. Some of it was due to what Colorado's inability to do up front running the football posed. But the crowd impacted that. Can Nebraska have similar impacts on Bryce Underwood? We'll see. He's younger, hasn't been here, has played in some big-time high school games. And he's been a winner wherever he's been. So will that characteristic exude itself? Or will we see what we saw last year on the other end with Dylan, where sometimes the inexperience and the age and the maturity showed and manifested itself? That's really one of the great questions. If there's three, that's one of them. It's, can Bryce Underwood, who played down in Norman and looked very un-Bryce-like in terms of what we project Bryce to be, how much will he grow from that? How much did he learn from that? And if you're Nebraska, it's, well, shoot, how much of that is portable in terms of making him uncomfortable? We'll see where Underwood is with that in terms of growth.
Well, let's flip the attention now to Dylan real quickly, because this is a quarterback who's played an entire Big Ten schedule now, and he's really talked about how much he's embraced the adversity he faced last year. Where do you think this game in particular can show his maturity? And, he told me in that interview preseason, I went back and watched about every game 3 to 4 times. How did those moments help prepare him for this kind of game?
Beautiful question. It's twofold. Number one, it's handling pre-snap looks. It's Michigan and Coach Martin, they will come with some pressure, and they will show you pre-snap looks and do something different. So how will Dylan handle what those pre-snap looks look like in terms of where I need to go with the football? And then number two, he completes 80% of his passes since he's been at Nebraska against primarily zone coverages. He has not been near as effective against man-to-man coverages. Michigan will show him some man-to-man, and he's going to have to trust and have some confidence that in not necessarily 50-50 balls, because I don't think you want to leave it to chance. It's tight window throws. Is he willing to just grip it and rip it and fit the ball in windows in which guys aren't sitting down in zones? How has he evolved in terms of man beaters, and what will he do with pre-snap looks? I think early on we'll get a good snapshot in terms of his growth and development.
Well, statistically, Michigan does give up more first downs passing than rushing. How much of an advantage will that be to Nebraska with how often they've spread the ball around so far?
Well, that's key. And I think catching the football, this sounds so dumb to say out loud, but catching catchable balls. You just can't give extra opportunities in a game like this. When a ball hits you in the hands, get it secured, get vertical, have them do that signal where they wave, moving the sticks for a first down. The more Nebraska can do that, the better off they'll be, because I do think they'll have some opportunities to win on the perimeter. They just have to make sure that they secure the catch and they don't leave it to chance in terms of, my bad, right? When you have the opportunity to make a catch, get it, move the sticks, make them snap it again. I think ultimately Coach Holgorsen wants to run the football, but when Nebraska gets their opportunities and puts their hands on footballs, make sure you secure the catch, because they'll have a couple of those available to them.
Yeah, on that topic then, how much of a weapon do you think Emmett Johnson can be this weekend?
So I think out of the backfield, I really like Michigan's linebackers. They're active, they're explosive. We know about guys like Ernest Hausman. I don't know if Nebraska can win out there with EJ and their backs against their linebacking core per se. I think it's a very interesting cat and mouse matchup of when they do it. The key, in my opinion, is can Nebraska neutralize Michigan's linebackers with their tight end passing game and their intermediate passing game. Luke Lindemeyer, Heinrich Haarberg, this is a game that's tailor-made for them with these athletic, kind of undersized Michigan linebackers that can really get after you. in terms of fitting in the run game and their coverage skills? Can you force them to play it honest with the intermediate passing game? For me, that's really where the game within the game is played.
Well, then you have to feel pretty encouraged when you hear Heinrich Haarberg speak yesterday. I think that was a really mature take that he had. He had the block that caught everyone's attention. He was like, yeah, but it didn't end up really doing anything. When you have a guy like that who shares with us, I see the game from a quarterback's perspective, has the willingness to be as physical as he possibly is committing to, and then also has the maturity to say, I actually need to get better. Where do you see him maybe having that big impact this weekend with a mindset like that?
Hop on board. Big, broad shoulders. Hop on board. Get on that guy's back. He's in a tight end room that oozes confidence, that has really good leadership from Coach Satterfield, obviously led by Lindenmeyer. Haarberg is one of those guys. You know, I joke and I tell the story. It's snowing out at Fordham, and they're plowing the field, and there's a couple inches of snow out there for the bowl game practice. And Haarberg is the first or second guy out there with no shirt on, got his pads draped over his shoulder, ready to go. I asked him what he's doing. He's like, embracing the elements, you know. And that's just how he is, right? He's been through the highs and lows of the quarterback spot and the offensive coordinating transition, so he understands the struggle. The cool thing about it is he embraces the challenge. He knows he's not a finished product, and his work is never done. I can't tell you how crucial I think that is. And it doesn't matter if it's football or any other sport. Sometimes it's just life. When you understand that your work is never done, you're not a finished product, and you're a lifelong learner, you give yourself a chance to continue to grow. And so for Haarberg, he's going to be critical on Saturday. And I mean that. The tight end position is going to be critical. The intermediate passing game is going to be critical. The thing that I like the most about what he was talking about during the press conference is it won't catch him by surprise. He's well aware of the importance of what he brings to the table.
Well, then I know this feels like the obvious. The next step of the game, we've talked offense, defense. How much of a difference maker can special teams be for Nebraska if they do it well this weekend?
It's critical. You have to continue to make field goals. You have to continue to put yourself in position with punt returns where you give yourself a chance at a return. And then the two things that I think need to get a little bit better. I'd like to see your kickoff return game be a little more efficient, and certainly your kickoff. You cannot allow Michigan's offense to start the ball at the 35-yard line. These guys are going to be too good at some point. Underwood is too talented. He's just too talented of a back. You don't want to make a living having those guys start at the 35-yard line. I think special teams will be huge.
Well, I feel like we can't really end this segment without talking about a little parallel between Bud Crawford and this team. It would feel wrong. The minute he said it on Saturday, I knew we had to talk about it. Anybody can be a nobody. And I know it's been brought up a few times, but of course it comes on Michigan week. How much do you think Coach Rhule, one, might be using that, but two, if he's not, how does that apply to this Michigan game like no other?
I love it. And I think it's the quote within the quote. Obviously, you know, I love Bud and get a chance to occasionally talk to him about things that aren't about actual boxing. And his point was, with his resume, all everybody said was whether, it didn't matter who he fought. Oh, they were a nobody, you know. And he just kept saying to himself, you keep putting him in front of me, I'll knock him down. And if you're Canelo and you're knocking my record, well, are you going to be the next nobody or are you somebody? For Nebraska, it's always been this. Well, hey, it was just Cincinnati, or you did that against a losing Wisconsin team, or, you know, Boston College didn't have their pass rusher, or they played without their starting NFL caliber left tackle, or it's just Houston Christian. If you're Nebraska and you truly are on that mindset of anybody can be a nobody, what will you say if Nebraska beats Michigan? Will it be the narrative of, well, Michigan isn't there yet, or they played with a freshman quarterback, or their offensive line isn't whatever. They don't have Sharon Moore. Nebraska can't get caught up in that. They have to go in understanding full well the narrative and the beautiful quote from TC where if anybody can be a nobody, is Michigan going to be the next nobody?
Yeah.
And I think that's how they got to approach it.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap this up, you also have a special weekend. You have a lot of teammates in town. It's the 95 reunion. I want you to speak on that a little bit from the inside of the locker room, that 95 team. What made that group so special?
Definitely camaraderie and chemistry. We get along really, really well. It was highly competitive, but we were other-centered. Some of those guys are some of my best friends, and it wasn't always rainbows and butterflies. It was hotly contested. It was very competitive. It was extremely physical. But at the end of the day, I can go to a guy like Ristrom. You know, we had one of the famous knockdown, drag-out fights, the running backs against those defensive ends. You know, Christian and Jason started it. Clint Childs was having none of it. We had his back. Wistrom and Thomas felt like they wanted to jump in. We're good to go. That fight lasted a good two hours, good 2.5 minutes, which is an eternity for a team brawl.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you're hugging it up, you're dapping it out, you're sitting next to each other in the locker room after we had to run a fair amount, and you're saying, that's what it's about. I love you, man. And for that, I think it's one of the reasons why we appreciate each other as much as we do. Even though it was ultra competitive, I'm for you, you're for me. We may disagree, but at the end of the day, we're family. And I'm just telling you, sure as I'm sitting here, Ave, I think I've alluded to this before with you. Nebraska's key to success this season isn't about physical prowess. Mm-hmm. It's about the 6 inches between their ears. And if they understand and they're for one another, regardless of what goes on outside or in the extracurriculars, and they can rally for one another, that's the best opportunity that they'll have for success. And that's one of the things that I love most about that team.
Yeah, well, you lead me naturally to my last question. Rhule shared this week with the 95 team in attendance. We hope to play to a level that would make them proud. If this was a 95 team getting ready to go play this Michigan team this weekend, what's the mentality of this group that made that 95 team unbeatable?
So, number one, it is we couldn't care less that it's Michigan. It is the standard is the standard. And we want to make sure that everybody else understands who we are. You don't talk much about Michigan. You don't talk much about whomever it was that year. Nobody talks about how bad Florida was. They talk about how good Nebraska was. That Florida team, you know, you got almost 20 NFL draft picks. That Miami 94 team had a ton of draft picks. You know what we don't talk about? The players on either one of those teams. Mm-hmm. You talk about Nebraska. If Nebraska really wants to be proud of what this Nebraska team is doing, don't make it about Michigan. Make it about Nebraska.
Well, we'll see if everyone's talking about Nebraska come this Saturday when the Huskers kick off their conference opener against Michigan here in Lincoln.